For 40 years he worked in the same corner barber shop. He had given haircuts to 3 generations of customers, never once speaking about his past. Until that day when a young customer saw the deep burn scars on his hands and asked, "Boss, where did these marks come from?" Welcome to Story Factory. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes the greatest heroes hide in the most ordinary places. The small barber shop on the corner of Maple Street had been in the same spot since 1983. A faded red, white, blue barber pole spun in the window, and inside were old leather chairs and vintage mirrors. This wasn't just a barber shop. It was the heart of the neighborhood, where stories lived and breathed. Victor opened his shop every morning at 7 o'clock a.m. He was 64 now. His hair had turned silver, but his hands were still steady. He wielded scissors and razor with such mastery, as if he was born to do exactly this. Everyone in the neighborhood knew him. They called him Victor Boss. He had given their first haircuts as children, prepared their wedding shaves as young men, and now they brought their own sons to the same chair. The shop was small but warm. The walls were filled with old photographs, frames that told the history of the neighborhood. Victor himself appeared in many of these photos, but always in the background, always quietly. That morning, as always, Victor started his old coffee machine. The smell of coffee filled the shop. This was one of the details his customers loved most. Then he arranged his tools: scissors, comb, razor, powder. Everything in its place, the same order for 40 years. His first customer was George, 55 years old, retired police officer. He'd been coming to Victor for 25 years. "Good morning, boss," said George, settling into the chair. "Good morning, George. The usual?" Of course. This was their routine. George was talkative. Victor was a listener. George would tell neighborhood news. Victor would nod along. These conversations had been going on for 25 years. "Boss," said George as Victor cut his hair, "have I ever been curious about you? I mean, how did you come to this neighborhood? Where are you from?" Victor's hand paused for a moment. These kinds of questions were rarely asked. "From around here," he said briefly. "Long story." George didn't insist further. He knew Victor didn't like talking about his private life. Days always flowed with the same rhythm. Victor would come early in the morning, make his coffee, and wait for his customers. At lunch, he'd eat a small sandwich and close the shop before sunset. His customers included all kinds of people: old men, middle-aged fathers, young children. They all trusted Victor, because he wasn't just a good barber. He was a good listener, too. Michael, a 45-year-old accountant, had first told Victor about being fired from his job. James, a 30-year-old teacher, had cried in Victor's chair during his divorce proceedings. Samuel, a 17-year-old high school student, had shown Victor his college acceptance letter. Victor listened to them all, sometimes gave advice, but mostly just was there. This was his gift. He put people at ease. But no one knew Victor's own story. Every evening, when he closed the shop and walked home, Victor would examine his hands. Between his fingers, on his wrists, on his arms, there were marks, old, faded, but still visible marks. These marks were memories of the past. Sometimes in his dreams he relived that night. The sounds of flames, the smell of smoke, screams. Then he'd wake up, drenched in sweat. That Wednesday, a new customer came to his shop. Daniel, 22 years old, a college senior. He was studying medical school and had recently moved to this neighborhood. "Hello," said Daniel hesitantly. "Could I get a haircut?" Victor smiled. "Of course. Welcome." Daniel sat in the chair. He had young, curious eyes. He was examining the surroundings, looking at the photographs. "This shop is so nostalgic," he said. "How many years have you been here?" 40 years, said Victor, picking up his scissors. "Wow, you must have so many stories then." Victor nodded. "Every barber has stories." Daniel was a talkative young man. He talked about university, medical education, future plans. Victor listened. There was something familiar about this young man, but he couldn't figure out what. "Boss," said Daniel as Victor washed his hands, "you have marks on your hands. What are those?" Victor froze. For 40 years, no one had asked such a direct question. "Old marks," he said, quickly drying his hands. "They look like burn scars, very deep ones, too. How did it happen?" Victor's heart began to race. He wasn't ready to answer this question. He had never been ready. "Accidents happen," he said briefly. Daniel couldn't hide his curiosity. As a medical student, he recognized burn scars. These weren't ordinary accidents. "Excuse me, boss, but these are serious burn injuries. It's like you were exposed to very high temperatures. Are you a firefighter?" Victor's face went pale. "No," he said, "I'm not." But the tremor in his voice made it clear he wanted to escape this topic. After Daniel left the shop that day, Victor couldn't find peace. No one had paid attention to those marks for a long time, or at least no one had asked questions. That evening, as he closed the shop, he looked in the mirror. There were traces of fatigue on his aged face. 40 years. He had hidden his past for 40 years. Maybe he was tired of hiding it now. At home, before cooking dinner, he took out a small box from the top shelf of his bedroom closet. Inside were old photographs, medals, and newspaper clippings. The photo on top was from 1978. Young Victor, in his firefighter uniform, smiling with his colleagues. How young he was then. What a different life he had. He shuffled through the newspaper clippings. Hero firefighter saves 12 people. Victor Thompson receives bravery medal. Firefighter injured in blaze hospitalized. These news stories seemed like they were from another life, from another Victor. That night, he had the same dream again. The year 1982, the big apartment fire downtown, flames starting from the 3rd floor of a 5-story building, families trapped inside. In his dream, everything was as vivid as that night. Siren sounds, orders, running around. And then, that decision. The decision to enter the building. There was one more family on the third floor, but this time the side wall had collapsed. Victor was trapped underneath. Hands, arms, face. Burned. But he had saved that family. He woke up drenched in sweat. As always, Daniel came back the following week. This time he seemed more determined. "Hello, boss," he said. "I came back." "Welcome, Daniel. Haircut again?" "Actually, I came to talk to you." Victor's hand stopped as he reached for the scissors. "About what?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Boss, I went home last week and did some research. In 1982, there was a big fire downtown. It was huge news at the time." Victor's face went white. "Daniel, a firefighter named Victor Thompson became a hero. He saved 12 people, was seriously injured in his last mission. After that, the trail went cold." There was a long silence. Inside the shop, only the ticking of the old clock could be heard. "You're that Victor, aren't you?" Victor slowly sat in the chair. After 40 years, the truth was coming out. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The burn scars on your hands, your age, and that look in your eyes. My grandfather was also a firefighter. I recognize that look." Victor bowed his head. "Daniel, please." "Boss, why did you hide it? You're a hero." Victor smiled bitterly. "A hero? That night, when I was trying to save one more family, I nearly killed my own team. 2 of my friends were injured because of the collapsing wall." Daniel listened silently. Victor continued. "That night, when I climbed to the floor where the last family was, the building was already very unstable. My commander ordered me to retreat. But there was a 4-year-old child inside." Victor's eyes filled with tears. "I went in. I found the child and mother. I got them to safety. But I went back in to find the father. That's when the side wall collapsed." "What happened?" "I was severely injured. I spent months in the hospital. My career was over, but worse. Because of that collapsing wall, 2 of my friends were also injured. One lost his leg." Daniel was beginning to understand. "Do you blame yourself? If I had followed orders, none of it would have happened. Yes, I saved that family, but I harmed others." "Boss," Daniel said softly, "you saved 12 people's lives that night, and your injured friends. They would have made the same decision you did." Victor looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, they were firefighters too. They also chose that profession to save lives. Taking risks was part of their job." Victor hadn't thought this way for a long time. "You've been punishing yourself for 40 years, said Daniel. "But everyone in the neighborhood loves you. Everyone trusts you. Maybe it's time to trust yourself too." Just then, They heard the sound of brakes from outside, then metal sounds and screams. Victor and Daniel ran outside. There had been an accident at the corner. A young woman had skidded and fallen with her motorcycle. The bike had caught fire. The woman was lying motionless on the ground. People had gathered, but no one could approach. The motorcycle was burning, and the smell of gasoline was spreading in the air. "I called the ambulance," someone shouted. "Don't get close, it might explode," said someone else. But Victor had moved. 40 years of instincts had kicked in. He quickly ran to the shop, grabbed the old blanket, soaked it with water. "Boss, what are you doing?" Daniel shouted. "We need to get the injured person away from there," said Victor, throwing the wet blanket over himself. "The bike might explode." And 64-year-old Victor began to move just like 40 years ago. He placed the wet blanket between the motorcycle and the injured person, trying to extinguish the flames. Then he approached the injured woman. "Miss, can you hear me?" The woman groaned. She was conscious but injured. My leg is broken." Victor carefully checked the wounds. Left leg broken, but no life-threatening danger. But he needed to move the motorcycle away from there. "Daniel!" he shouted. "Help me!" Daniel ran over. Victor began giving him instructions. "Don't touch her. I'll carry her. You go ahead. Clear the way." Victor lifted the injured woman so carefully and professionally, as if he had just left this job yesterday. After carrying her to a safe distance, he checked the wounds again. He tore pieces from his shirt and bandaged the bleeding areas. "This will hurt," he said, starting to stabilize her leg. "But I won't move you. We'll wait until the ambulance arrives." The woman looked into Victor's eyes. Are you a doctor?" Victor smiled. "No, just old habits." When the ambulance arrived, the paramedic saw Victor's intervention. "Who performed this first aid?" asked the ambulance driver. "He did," said Daniel, pointing to Victor. The paramedic looked at Victor. "Do you have medical training?" Victor hesitated. Then, for the first time in 40 years, he told the truth. "I'm a retired firefighter." The paramedic nodded. "Perfect intervention. You saved this woman's life." After the ambulance left, the neighborhood residents gathered around Victor. Everyone was talking about what had just happened. "Victor Boss became a hero. He even approached the burning motorcycle." What was that professional movement? George, his old customer, approached Victor. "Boss," he said, "were you really a firefighter?" Victor looked at all the faces around him, the neighbors he had served for 40 years. They were all looking with curiosity, but with love. "Yes," he said. "I retired 40 years ago." "Why didn't you ever tell us?" asked another neighbor. Victor took a deep breath. Because I thought that part of me was left behind." Daniel stood beside Victor. "But it wasn't, was it, boss?" Victor smiled. After 40 years, a real smile. I guess it wasn't." In the following days, the barber shop was wrapped in a different atmosphere than usual. Customers were coming not just for haircuts. They also came to listen to Victor's story. Children stood in front of the window looking at firefighter Boss. George came. "Boss," he said, "why didn't you tell us? We're proud of you." "There was nothing to be proud of," said Victor. "I was just doing my job." "I've known you for 18 years, said Michael, the accountant customer. "You always listened to me. Now it's our turn. Tell us about those nights." Victor shook his head. "They're in the past." "No," said Daniel, entering through the shop door. "They're not in the past. You proved it last night." There was a middle-aged woman with Daniel. "Boss," said Daniel, "I want to introduce someone to you. This is Sarah, the sister of the woman you saved yesterday." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes full. "Mr. Victor," she said, "my sister is in the hospital. The doctors said it could have been much worse if not for your intervention." Victor bowed his head. "It doesn't matter. Her recovery is most important." "But it does matter," said Sarah. "And I learned that you're a former firefighter. How many people's lives have you saved?" Victor didn't answer. "Boss," said Daniel, "the neighborhood should know you, the real you." Victor thought for a long time. Then he looked at the old photo frame. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. That evening, before Victor closed the shop, he hung one more photo next to the old photographs on the wall. The firefighter photo from 1978. Young Victor in his uniform looking proudly. Daniel came. "Good decision," he said. "Maybe it's time to make peace with the past," said Victor. "And maybe," said Daniel, "it's time to share your story. Children in the neighborhood knowing there's a barber with firefighter background will feel even safer." Victor smiled. "You're a very smart young man, Daniel." "I'm just telling the truth. You've been silent for too long." That night, as Victor walked home, he looked at the marks on his hands. But this time he wasn't ashamed. These marks were the traces of heroism, the marks of saving lives. And the next morning, when he opened his shop, he hung a small sign on his door. Victor's Barber Shop, serving since 1983. Former firefighter Victor Thompson. There was nothing left to hide. For 40 years, Victor hid his past. He blamed himself, lived quietly. But sometimes, the past returns to embrace the future. Victor's story taught his neighborhood this: heroism isn't just in the uniform. Sometimes it's hidden in a barber chair with scissors in hand, in the ability to listen. And that curious question from young Daniel didn't just reveal a secret. It allowed a man to make peace with himself. Because real heroes never truly retire. They just continue to serve in different ways. Thank you for watching this powerful story from Story Factory. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard more, don't forget to subscribe and share your comments. Because there's a Victor in every neighborhood, and their stories deserve to be told. As Story Factory, we will continue to be the voice of silent heroes. See you in the next story.